We've spent a lot of time lately talking about the modern villain. We've criticized the overused trauma dump backstories and the trend of redeeming characters who have committed terrible crimes. But there is a deeper, more fundamental problem in how we write modern villains. And do you know what's really insane about this issue? Nobody likes to talk about it, but today we will. We can't understand the modern villain problem without looking at the history of how villains are made. Think of it like a medical history that helps a doctor diagnose a disease. And what better way to start your diagnosis than by looking at what a real villain should look like? You can't say there's a problem without comparing it with what is possible when that problem is not there. Now, we can decide to go back to the classic villains to understand the problem of today, but we will be jumping the gun. So the best way to understand the issue is by looking at real villains, or real-world bad guys like Genghis Khan and Adolf Hitler. Because if a villain is going to be a threat, they should feel like a real force of nature, right? For example, Genghis Khan was a conqueror who wanted to own everything he saw. He would ride into towns with his army and tell the people they had two choices: surrender or get destroyed. His brand of evil was based on a simple, cold logic, wherein he used fear as a tool. Genghis Khan was so ruthless that he killed an estimated 40 million people. In the 1200s, this was about 11% of the world's population at the time. The next time 40 million people died in war was World War II, but World War II had tanks, fighter jets, and even a nuke. Genghis Khan got his body count with just bows and arrows. It's insane, but he did it somehow. This guy wiped out so many people that forests actually started growing where cities used to stand. This shows just how high the cost of villainy can be, and it's one of the ways we can identify the issue with modern villains. But can we say animated movies have ever portrayed their villains this way? Well, yes. Shan Yu from Mulan is the animated version of Genghis Khan, in that he is obsessed with total control through force. Even though his character was mostly inspired by another devilish ruler, Attila the Hun, Shan Yu is very similar to Genghis, especially in terms of strategic ruthlessness. Just like the real Genghis Khan, who leveled entire cities, massacred millions, and stacked their skulls to form mountains, Shan Yu moves through the world, leaving nothing but ash behind. Remember that scene in Mulan where a little girl's doll is found in a village burned down by Shan Yu's army? That doll indicated that Shan Yu had just wiped out everyone in that village, including the children. That's the cost of destruction. This also increases the price that the heroes would have to pay to have him defeated in the end. So we can say that yes, Shan Yu was a true villain since he was modeled after a real-world villain. Then we have Scar from The Lion King. Scar represents the ultimate betrayal of family and country, much like how dictators in history have stepped over the bodies of their own people to get power. A tyrant like Attila the Hun was known to have murdered his own brother, just like Scar did Mufasa. But what about Hitler? Was there any villain like him? Well, maybe not as far-reaching as him, but Judge Claude Frollo was a lot like Hitler. Frollo is a direct reflection of the kind of hatred that the Nazis had, because he too was a violent racist, who viewed an entire group of people, the Romani, as less than human. Just like Hitler wanted to wipe out the Jews and the Slavs, Frollo's entire goal was to purify Paris by eliminating every single gypsy person he could find.
You make your point quite vividly, sir.
He calls them names, traps them in their homes, and even burns an innocent family alive just because he thinks they might be hiding his enemies. At the very start of the movie, he even kills a mother on the steps of a church and tries to drown her baby in a well. That is the kind of cold, heartless hatred that changed our real-world history books. So yes, Frollo cannot beat the villain allegation, and neither can Fire Lord Ozai. Ozai is very much like Emperor Nero of Rome, a leader who believed he was a god, almost like how Ozai wants to be called the Phoenix King and rule the whole world. The two of them are also famous for being incredibly cruel to the people closest to them. Ozai burned his own son Zuko and sent him away just to teach him a lesson. Not to mention that he was ready to kill Zuko on 3 major occasions. First on Azulan's orders, next during their Agni Kai, and then during the eclipse. You see, making Zuko suffer this much in the hands of his father before his redemption was no accident. It is yet another way we can diagnose the villain problem. But it also mirrors what is possible in real life. Because check this out, history tells us that Nero personally ordered the assassination of his own mother by drowning. And when that failed, he just sent soldiers to finish the job with swords. Also, after the Great Fire that destroyed Rome, Nero is said to have rebuilt the city to his taste. And because of this, people believed he was the one who caused the fire, even though this wasn't true. In any case, Fire Lord Ozai's plan at the end of the Avatar series was to burn down the entire world and rebuild it to his taste. And he was very much on his way to doing that, were it not for the Avatar. Now, some people might try to tell you that Ozai doesn't count as a classic villain just because he showed up in 2005, but they would be totally wrong. This is because the moral ambiguity, complex backstory, or tragic motivations that usually characterize our modern villains are absent in Ozai. Hence, he is classified amongst older villains like Scar and Shan Yu. But his characterization of the modern villain is where the problem starts, because as we try to compare our new age villain with real-world evil, we discover some very weird stuff. You see, one of the weird things we noticed about modern villains is that the backstory is not actually a problem. This is because when you look at the backstory of a real modern villain like Genghis Khan, you start to understand what we mean. Bro's childhood was like a very sad movie. When he was only 9 years old, his father was poisoned by enemies. After that, his own clan kicked him, his mother, and his siblings out. They were left with nothing and had to eat roots and wild fish just to stay alive. One time, he was even captured and enslaved by a rival tribe. They put a heavy wooden collar around his neck and treated him like an animal. Even the famed serial killer Ed Gein started very dark too. He lived on a lonely farm with a mother who was very, very strict. She told him every single day that the world was a bad place and that he shouldn't have any friends. His father was even worse, a violent man who hit Ed so hard on the head that his ears would ring. It is a truly tragic story. But again, millions of people have hard lives, and they don't grow up to do the scary things Ed and Genghis did. So when animated movies start making villains with tragic backstories, it also made sense. Think about Syndrome from The Incredibles. When he was a little boy named Buddy, all he wanted was to help his hero. But Mr. Incredible was mean to him and told him to go home because he works alone. Buddy was so heartbroken that he spent his whole life becoming a villain just to get revenge. Then there is Lotso from Toy Story 3. He was once the favorite toy of a little girl named Daisy, but one day he was accidentally left behind at a rest stop. He spent a long time traveling through the rain and the mud to get back to her house, only to look through the window and see that she had bought a brand new bear. He felt replaced and unloved, leading him to turn a daycare center into a prison for other toys. So why does this matter? It does because the problem with modern villains is not the backstory, since real villains had painful beginnings too. Then maybe the issue is that villains are not ruthless enough. Well, a character like Lord Shen would strongly disagree. He is one of the most ruthless villains in modern animation, and his actions prove it. When he hears a prophecy that says a panda will defeat him, he sends his army to wipe out the entirety of the panda species. That decision leads to the death of countless pandas, including Po's mother, all because Lord Shen is trying to erase a future before it can even happen. And he does not stop there. He builds weapons that change the balance of power, cannons that can destroy kung fu masters from a distance. He uses them to take over a city, lock up its protectors, and rule through force. When someone stands in his way, like Master Thundering Rhino, he kills them without hesitation. Shen also shows a different kind of cruelty. He plays with people's emotions. When he talks to Po, he twists the truth about his past just to break him. And just like real tyrants, he does not care about the people who follow him either. He sends his own soldiers into danger and sacrifices them without a second thought. At one point, he is even willing to destroy his own fleet just to stop Po. That tells you everything you need to know. To Shen, power matters more than anything else. Loyalty, family, human life, all those are irrelevant to his pursuit of power. So now we have a strange situation. Modern villains can have tragic backstories, just like real villains. They can also be ruthless, just like real villains. So if it is not their past and is not their level of cruelty, then something else must be going wrong. To understand the modern villain problem, we have to look at how Frollo dies at the end of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Frollo spent the whole movie being a mean, hypocritical man who thought he was a saint while acting like a monster. At the end, he stands on a gargoyle and shouts about how God will throw the wicked into a fiery pit.
And he shall smite the wicked and plunge them into the fiery pit.
That has always been who he is. A man who hides behind religion to justify hate and who believes he is chosen to punish others. But right then, the gargoyle under his feet cracks, and he had to hold on for dear life. Unfortunately for him, the gargoyle comes alive, he screams in terror, and then falls into the lava. This is consistent because Frollo's biggest fear was always that God was watching his sins. The gargoyles represented that eye of justice he couldn't escape. So basically, he died exactly how a man like him should, scared of the very holy justice he used to hurt others. Real life works the same way. The truly scary bad guys in our history books died in ways that matched who they were. The Roman emperor we talked about before, Nero, was a man who loved attention and thought he was a great artist. But he was also a coward who couldn't take responsibility for his actions. So, when he realized he was about to be captured and killed, he fled to a small house and took his own life because he was terrified of being humiliated. His very last words were, "What an artist dies with me." So, even at the end, he was still a narcissist who only cared about himself. It was a consistent ending for a man who lived for his own ego and ran from his problems. Hitler had a similar end, also consistent with his nature. He was a man who spent his life obsessed with power and control. So, when he saw that he had lost the war and that the Soviet soldiers were just a few blocks away from his bunker, he didn't come out to face the music. He was terrified of being treated like Mussolini, whose body was put on public display for people to see. Hitler wanted to go out on his own terms, so he chose to end his own life in the dark underground, because he couldn't handle the idea of the world seeing him as a failure. But this is where modern movies start to make a big mistake. Lately, they make villains who are inconsistently competent. That's a big phrase, but it just means the writers make the villains smart when they want them to win, and then suddenly make them really stupid when they need the hero to win. Unlike real-world bad guys, or even classic villains like Frollo, the modern villain problem is this inconsistency. Syndrome was a fantastic villain who spent his whole life researching every single hero and villain. Yet, he somehow missed the crucial detail of supers who died because of capes. He built amazing technology and killed almost every hero he ever met. Bro was a genius, but then he captures Mr. Incredible twice, and even the entire Incredible family, yet he fails to pull the trigger. Not to mention the monologue trap he keeps falling into, even though he is aware of it. Why didn't he just kill them once and for all, as he did with all the other heroes? The answer is plot armor. The writers needed the heroes to live, so they made the smart villain act like a dummy. Vector is another genius-like syndrome who was ruined by being inconsistently competent. He is introduced as this tech genius who pulled off one of the biggest heists in the world. He steals the Great Pyramid and replaces it with an inflatable copy. That alone tells you he is careful, creative, and way ahead of everyone else. He builds a fortress with insane security. Sharks, lasers, and gadgets everywhere. This is not a careless person. But the moment the story needs Gru to get close, Vector suddenly becomes clueless. He lets the girls into his home with almost no suspicion. Even in the end, when his ship was in danger of getting destroyed by the expanding moon, this dude was still celebrating for no damn reason. Bro should have been trying to save himself, but no, he had to do a useless victory pose. Lord Business from the Lego Movie also suffers the same last-minute switch from his true nature. He is a cold, calculated leader who has spent years planning to glue the entire world together so everything stays perfect. He has an army of robots and the most advanced technology in the universe. He is so competent that he has already won before the movie even starts. But at the very end, he is defeated because of a speech about being special.
You don't have to be the bad guy.
A man who has spent his whole life being a ruthless dictator wouldn't suddenly change his entire personality because of a few nice words from a construction worker. Yet that was exactly what happened to Lord Business. Bro became soft right when the story needed a happy ending, which ignored the cold logic he used to build his empire in the first place. Imagine Genghis Khan stopping his conquest because a Chinese peasant told him to be nice. The fairy godmother in Shrek 2 is another example. She is a powerful magic user who should have been a more formidable opponent for the heroes. She is smart and has everyone cornered, but then she fires a spell that hits Harold's armor and bounces back, vaporizing her. It feels like a convenient accident just to end the movie, and it is. When movies do this, it makes the audience feel cheated. It's like watching a football match where one team is clearly better, but the referee suddenly makes up a new rule so the weaker team can win. This takes away the excitement because we know the hero is winning because the villain was forced to be stupid. This also ignores the scary reality of the real world. In real life, bad people actually win sometimes. So, if the hero is always going to win by luck, where is the realism? But the scariest reality check is that even when the good guys win, it usually costs a lot. There are dead friends, lost body parts, and feelings of sadness and fear that last forever. Yet, modern movies treat a battle like a game where you win, go home happy, and everything is perfect. Whereas, as we saw with Nero and Hitler, real evil stays consistent until the end. So, if we want our movies to feel real, our villains have to be just as reliable in their badness as the heroes are in their goodness. But are studios ready to do this? The answer is no, and the reasons why are not entirely crazy. A big part of why we refuse to let evil win goes all the way back to Walt Disney, who once said his movies were for the child in all of us. When he built his studio, he made one thing very clear, that these stories should be safe for families. That idea never really went away. It shaped how stories are told even today. If the villain wins, or if the ending feels too dark, studios worry that parents might not come back with their kids next time. There is also the way people see animation itself. For a long time, many of us have treated it as something mainly for children. This is why Brad Bird, who directed The Incredibles, once pushed hard against that idea, saying animation is just another way to tell stories. But even with voices like his, the expectation still sits there. If people think your movie is for kids, they expect a clear good wins ending, and studios do not like breaking that expectation too much. Money also plays a big role, even if people do not like to say it out loud. Animated films cost a lot to make. We are talking huge teams, years of work, and very big budgets.
It looks absolutely exhausting, darling. Oh.
Tangled cost around $260 million to make, while Cars 2 and Toy Story 3 cost $200 million each. When that much money is on the line, studios play it safe. A happy ending is easier to sell across the world. It works in some countries, across more cultures, and with more age groups. Then there is something else that is easy to miss: franchises. You see, a lot of these stories are part of a bigger plan. Sequels, shows, spin-offs, toys, games. Therefore, if you kill the hero or let evil fully win, you close the door on all of that. So sometimes the story bends a little to keep things going. The hero survives, the world resets, and the door stays open for the next chapter. There is also the emotional side. Kids watch these movies while they are still learning how the world works. Stories help shape how they see right and wrong. Many filmmakers feel a responsibility here. They want to show that doing the right thing matters. So they build endings where good wins, even if the journey gets rough. But the truth still remains that when we refuse to let the bad guy be consistent and scary, we are telling kids that evil is just a mistake that is easy to fix. Whereas real life shows us that defeating a real monster takes everything you've got. The fight against evil always has casualties, and the survivors suffer tremendous trauma. Poland lost a fifth of its population fighting Germany. Russia lost 20 million. China also lost a similar number fighting Japan and had its population used as guinea pigs. Yet, in movies, we lower the cost to make the fight easier, which leaves us with heroes we don't truly admire because they didn't face insurmountable odds. If the hero always wins no matter what, the tension is gone. We need to see that the hero can lose so that the victory actually means something. A great story doesn't have to be nihilistic or depressing by letting the villain win everything, but it should be bittersweet. Take How to Train Your Dragon 2. The heroes win, but the cost is Stoic the Vast. Hiccup loses his father and is left with a hole in his heart and the heavy weight of being the new leader. That cost makes the victory feel real. We see this done even better in Arcane. This is one of the very few recent movies where the heroes lose a lot at the end. Jinx allegedly dies, but Victor and Jace definitely do, not to mention the young girl Isha, who dies too. But to make it even more realistic, we see the lasting implications of the struggles that the heroes experienced. We see Caitlyn lose an eye, and Vi and Echo are heartbroken beyond imagination. Now, imagine if the Incredibles had been that brave. What if Syndrome actually succeeded in taking out a member of the family? What if Mr. Incredible died saving his kids, and the sequel was about them growing up in a world without him, trying to live up to his legend? That would make Syndrome a terrifying, consistent villain, and make the hero's eventual triumph feel legendary. By being afraid to show the cost, we make our heroes look weaker, whereas a hero is only as great as the challenge they overcome. If the villain is a bumbling clown who can't land a punch, the hero hasn't really achieved anything. So we need more studios to take the bold step of showing that while good can triumph, it usually leaves a mark. Sometimes the hero has to go home broken, because that is what it truly costs to win. But dealing with the modern villain problem is one thing. Another issue that is seen in recent movies is how the stories are presented visually. Luckily, we made a video that talks about how to and how not to tell a story visually.